Welcome to the final lecture in the course examining our final communication-focused coping strategy, social support. In this lecture, we are going to really think about social support in the context of the transition to college. One stressor that was discussed really at the beginning of the class, and as we moved through the content, was this transition to college. Remember that first couple readings, we really talked about kind of college student stress. And so this transition, again, is going to be really further explored in this week's readings as well as the lecture for today. So as you know from some previous readings and these readings today, or for this week, the transition to college can be an extremely stressful one. It's often plagued by homesickness. It can increase peer pressure. Students can feel lonely, so loneliness, which can lead to depression. During the time of transition to college, college students often experience a change in kind of learning and the format of how you attend school. Living conditions change, so oftentimes students will move on campus, or they'll change communities to be in the campus community. And sleeping habits, as many of you identified as a stressor in the first week of the course, can change, and these can really increase our experience or exacerbate our experiences of stress during this time. Therefore, it is extremely important that college students find ways to reduce the stress that is oftentimes experienced during the transition to college. For example, students who experience psychological stress during this transition are more likely to be students who find the transition difficult. They may experience depression during college, they can have lower GPAs, and are at an increased risk of dropping out than students who are better able to cope with this transition. One way that research has found that students have reported coping with stress during the transition is through social support, and that's really what we're going to be talking about today. Social support was found in the model of communication-based coping that we've been talking about and centering most of our discussions on in the course. And we know that social support can buffer the stressful effects of life changes, including the transition to university. Social support helps people in four primary ways. It is a vehicle for emotional support, which helps individuals feel valued. It is important for informational support, which helps individuals better understand the problems that they're experiencing. It provides social companionship, which can help individuals feel less isolated or as part of a community. And social support is a vehicle for instrumental support, so providing needed resources or services that could help during a stressful time. Recently, researchers have identified a number of ways that social support benefits emerging adults during the transition to college. For example, researchers have found that social support from friends improves students' adjustment to college life, and students with higher levels of perceived social support were less likely to kind of internalize the stress and experience depression and anxiety symptoms. Additionally, social support from parents is often helpful in coping with the many different areas of stress that we can experience in university life. This research finally also indicates that students who communicate more frequently with their parents are better able to adjust during the transition. Although there are indeed many benefits of student-parent communication during the student's transition to college, there is also other research that suggests that this increased communication can be problematic. For instance, students who communicate with parents most frequently can experience threats to their autonomy or kind of individuality as they move and transition into college, and they can be less satisfied with both their college experience and their relationships with their parents. This phenomenon may be explained by the types of support that parents provide. If we take a look at the example of helicopter parents oftentimes are well-meaning parents who provide sometimes explained as intrusive support to their children. They are called helicopter parents because they're seen as hovering more than what is considered developmentally appropriate given the age of their children. And again, this can increase stress associated with their social support. So, this is a great example of how communication can be a stressor in our relationship. So, if we look back to that communication model of coping that we've been talking about, we talked about communication as both kind of a buffer of stress, but also can be the source of stress. And so, this is a great example of that. In the case of helicopter parents, the communication and social support they provide actually has been linked to college students who are more depressed, who experience more symptoms of depression, and are less satisfied with their lives at college than their peers. So, in this case of helicopter parents, social support from their parents is not actually buffering the stress, it's increasing the stress. It is the source of the stress or compounding the stress that they're already experiencing in college. So, we can think about this support from parents functioning in multiple different ways. With students transitioning to college and moving away from home, it is really important to consider how communication technologies can make it possible and likely that college students will receive social support from a distance, whether it's from their parents, whether it's social support from their friends from college or a romantic partner in which they're experiencing a long distance relationship. It could be a variety of different things. College students, we know, use a variety of communication technologies. Cell phones are extremely prevalent where you can text, you can FaceTime, we can access social media like Snapchat and Facebook and Twitter and all of those things. We use email and other technologies like Skype to communicate and maintain relationships with people who are not here with us at university who could provide social support. In the context that you read about in your readings today were the relationships with family members at home. Such communication technologies can be used to provide social support just as effectively as face-to-face communication, and students' use of these communication technologies during their transition to college has been associated with a successful adjustment and higher perceptions that they have access to social support when they need it. The study that you read for this week examined how college students use communication technologies to seek and receive support from family members. So we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail right now. From the study results on your readings, there are several key findings that are really important to discuss. The first is that students face diverse challenges while adjusting to college. Again, this isn't really new information to you. We talked a lot about this in the first week of the course, but the readings really talked about not just college in general, but that actual transition of coming to university, whether it's during their freshman year or, many students transfer into or between universities, and that can be very relevant there as well. So some students experience a great amount of stress and transitioning to college, and as well as other stressful factors that we've talked about before, or maybe other factors that may be unrelated to the transition, which would make the transition much more stressful. So as one might expect, the majority of challenges students faced in the research were college related. This includes challenging or stressful situations related to both academics, things like taking exams, choosing a major, registering for classes each semester, many of these things which are going to become very relevant to you, and campus life, so making new friends, living with roommates, getting involved in college organizations or student organizations, learning how to do things independently, so things like your laundry, making meals, paying bills, that maybe you've had support from other people in the past or they've done those things for you. One concern that college students in the sample or the study really identified were financial concerns. And this was also something that emerged in the first week of the course that many of you talked about in your discussion post. Participants in the study struggled with issues including finding a job on campus, learning to pay their own bills, and finding scholarships to help with tuition. Even students receiving financial support from their families expressed these concerns, and these concerns were in addition to non-academic stressors that emerging adults face, like health issues, parents, divorcing, maybe the death of a loved one, or an outing of one's sexual orientation, a breakup of an important relationship, or technology failure. So all of these things really exasperating the academic stress that students normatively experience in college. A second important finding from this research is that students consider a number of factors when determining which communication technology to use. These factors include the richness of the medium, the privacy available in their current physical environment or with the medium themselves, and the preferences of their communication partners, so the people that they are communicating with. So for example, the preference or kind of ability of your parent to navigate that communication technology. Specifically, social network sites like social network sites, text messaging, and email were the most frequently used technologies overall, with more than 90% of students reporting using them at least once a day. But there were also patterns of use that differentiated between family social support and non-family social support. All participants reported using cell phones to communicate with family members, and a majority reported using text messaging specifically, as well as video calls, social networking sites, email, even instant messaging. Social games and collaboration tools, such as like Words with Friends, or other kinds of games that you may play, were used by a majority of participants with their non-family contacts, but only a few of participants indicated using these technologies with family members. So we're seeing here that there's some technologies like cell phone, text messaging and calling and video chatting and things like that used across the board, and then some that were just used with like maybe friends that they kept in contact with. These differences indicate that first-year college students use technology to communicate with their social network members in a variety of nuanced ways. Many participants referred using cell phone and video calls to communicate with family members because of the richness and kind of personal connection that these technologies can afford. The third finding that I think is really important from this research is that communicating with family members on a regular basis provided students with opportunities for seeking and receiving social support, which is of course the kind of key points here in the course and the lecture. And for many of the participants, family members were seen as the first line of defense, so the first people that they reached out to when they were experiencing a problem, and the people with whom students immediately thought to contact when they needed something or they were experiencing a challenge. Given that students had spent their entire lives before moving to college with their families, it's really not that surprising that they continue to rely on these family members for support during college, especially as we're thinking about the transition to college, so thinking about the kind of freshman experience, moving from living at home to living on your own. We may see less of this if the study had included maybe kind of other aspects of the college life. As students begin to create more kind of meaningful social connections at college, that may become the front lines that you think about junior and senior year and things of that nature. And finally, as we look at the results of the study, students used communication technologies to maintain connections with and seek support from a variety of contacts, everyone from close family members to weak ties in their social networks. So, think about maybe like Facebook. There's a lot of people on Facebook that you may look at their profiles but not necessarily have routine contact with or communicate on the phone. We'd really call that like a weak tie. Many students described using communication technologies to stay in touch with extended family members. These family members provided useful perspectives and expertise to their social support networks. Furthermore, students often preferred social support from someone who had contextual knowledge of the situation that they were experiencing, so the stressor that they were experiencing. For challenges that arose on campus, the students in the study reported peers were often already familiar with the situation and sometimes were better able to provide immediate support than were family members who maybe lacked the background knowledge of the situation. Just as communication technologies enable students to receive support from family members, participants in the studies also revealed that how they kind of enabled maintenance of a broader social network with diverse contacts. Social networks such as like Facebook allow new college students to keep in touch with people that they would not typically, call when they were upset or need social support. Instagram is similar, or Snapchat, similar concepts here. And these technologies, social kind of media sites, also provided students with opportunities to receive support in ways that maybe were unexpected or surprising to them. So overall, we can really see that social support is important when experiencing a stressful situation. In fact, social support is key to the communication-based model of coping that I've kind of touched on throughout the lecture. And it really encompasses the communication as a resource box, as well as kind of communication as stress, as we talked about earlier. We will learn more about social support via, kind of thinking about this as you continue to think about communication in the course.